I joked about him being a piggy bank to my daughter, but she kept saying it daily, and then, "Hello, Reddit. My name is Sandra, and I'm a 35-year-old mother and wife. I am a stay-at-home wife and mother, and I've been married for 8 years now. I have had a peaceful marriage until now. My husband is filing for a divorce and custody lawsuit against me, and I really cannot lose David or our daughter. He's very angry with me and won't listen to anything I have to say or do because he found out about something I had said and another thing I had done. But it was all really a mistake, and I didn't know the consequences would be this dire. I was only joking when I said it. Not really, but it was meant to be a joke. I was trying to tease David in front of our 6-year-old daughter. She adores her father so much and almost never cares about me. Ever since Sophia began to talk, she had known only her father, even though I was the one who decided to stay at home with her and take care of her while her father worked. Her first words had been, "Papa," and she would always cry or get sick whenever David had to travel out of town for work. She barely pays me any attention whenever David is around. He was our hero, and I thought it was only a childhood thing, that when she grew up, I'd be her hero too. But that was not the case because as Sophia grew up, so did her likeness for her dad. She even nicknamed him after one of her superhero movies. She barely had time for me whenever her dad was around. She would even go as far as waiting up for him to come home before she did her homework and even ate her dinner. So it was always torturous dealing with her when her dad wasn't in town. That day, it was the weekend, and David was home. He was in his library as usual, trying to analyze our spending and savings for the month as he always does, which actually always frustrated me. I couldn't see a gown I liked and pick it, or just spend money the way I wanted because everything had to be accounted for. Truly, it helped us in our daily lives, and we already have enough savings to see Sophia through high school without fear. I know that David is only trying to save up for college for her. In case one of us or both of us wouldn't be around due to some reasons, he wanted everything to be ready for her. And at first, I liked that and even agreed with it. David is a planner, and he always planned for everything ahead, especially financially. We didn't do anything outside our budget. Although that had helped a lot with getting things done around the house, it still frustrated me. I wanted to be like Dora, my best friend, who spent money like she didn't care what tomorrow was going to be like. She had loads of money because her husband was always spoiling her. She would go shopping every day for bags, shoes, and dresses that screamed luxury. She didn't plan for a new dress as part of next month's budget. She just simply bought anything that caught her eye at that instant, even though she would put it away the next day or week and be interested in another thing. I wanted to be like her so badly that I did some very bad things, and that has contributed majorly to the reason David doesn't want me anymore. Anyways, David saved a lot, and I had always jokingly teased him about it in the privacy of our bedroom. I never said it in front of our daughter, though, because we had always promised never to say some things in front of our very smart daughter. But I had gone and said it anyway, and now everything's just ruined. I should probably give you guys a backstory if I want some help, as I've come here for. I met David years back before we even started dating at all. I had not liked David at all when I met him. He was the safe and boring type. He didn't do anything without planning ahead. He wasn't spontaneous and adventurous. He hardly even went out to clubs like most men of his age did because he was always working. And when he wasn't working, he was calculating. He was just simply not my type. So I didn't even pay him any attention when we first met. He was my older brother's friend, and although my parents adored him because of how much influence he had on my very adventurous brother, I didn't feel the same way. At the time we met, I was dating a guy whose name was Simon. I had always thought that Simon and I were going to end up getting married because of how long we had been together at that point. Simon had been everything that David wasn't. He was rich, really handsome, and popular, especially amongst girls. He was adventurous and the life of the party. When Simon and I started dating, I felt on top of the world. I was happy. I didn't even mind that he was cheating on me, and I knew about it. All that mattered back then was that I was the girl he boasted about to his friends and others. I was the main girl. I didn't mind the other factors, but eventually, Simon ended things with me. His excuse was, "You're too demanding," and "You want marriage soon, and I don't. We don't click or agree." I was so heartbroken, and I had sworn never to have anything to do with guys that I didn't consider safe. David had liked me from the beginning, and I had always known that, but I just wasn't interested in him like that. But when Simon broke my heart, David had been there, helping me get over him, and I decided to date him. It was the best decision I ever made because David was simply the calmest and kindest man I had ever dated. He was surprisingly romantic, even though he never did anything without telling me in advance or planning for it. For me, it was quite refreshing being with someone who knew what he wanted to achieve in the next month or next year. Unlike my other exes, especially Simon, who didn't even know what their next day would be like because of how reckless they behaved, it wasn't hard to fall in love with David. He was just the perfect man, and he was and still is a hard worker. After 6 months of dating, David had proposed to me, and we had gotten married within a month. Before we got married, we had agreed that I shouldn't work or just do a minor job that I could quit anytime, so that, in case I got pregnant, I would easily just stay at home with our baby. The first year I didn't get pregnant, so I started working at a local bar as a waitress at the beginning of the second year, but I eventually quit the job because I kept getting different offers that weren't appropriate. When I told David about it, he was glad I quit. I decided not to look for another job and just stay at home, and David had been supportive of my decision. He clearly earned and saved more than enough for our expenses, so my input wasn't needed. I got pregnant in the second year of marriage, and I had my baby, Sophia. She was the cutest thing ever, and David obviously loved our daughter very much from the moment he set his eyes on her. After having Sophia, I was getting bored staying back at home. Although I only had the responsibility of taking care of our daughter, David made extra effort by hiring a housekeeper who helped with the cleaning of the house and other minor things. Whenever he was back from work, he finished whatever work was remaining. But I was still struggling being at home, especially the first year when I had to breastfeed Sophia, who was always crying. She didn't even like being put down to sleep. She would scream her lungs out, and it annoyed me so much. I never told David this. I felt horrible that I was feeling like that when I actually am her mother, so I kept my frustrations to myself. Eventually, I started dropping Sophia with the housekeeper, and I would go out with Dora, who always had another shop to raid for things she didn't even need. When Sophia was mature enough to start kindergarten, I was relieved, and I would get up early to prepare her for school so that David could drop her off on his way to work and would send someone to pick her up and drop home. I finally had my peace, and I could do anything I wanted with my time. And I did. I hung out more and more with Dora and her new clique of friends, who felt it was only right to spend their husbands' or boyfriends' money. I didn't feel among them at first because I was the poorest amongst them. Not because David and I were actually poor, but because every money had a budget. Although David gave me an allowance to buy whatever I wanted, it was small compared to what my friends spent in a day, and David would ask me what I spent it on if I squandered the money, so I couldn't spend recklessly as I would like to. Dora saw my struggles, and she had finally told me her secret. Her husband wasn't as rich as she portrayed. He was actually struggling financially because, a year after they got married, his business had become bankrupt, so he was struggling to keep it afloat. She told me that all the money she spent was actually gotten from the man she was having an affair with. I was so shocked and surprised. I didn't know that Dora was sleeping with another man in between her never-ending shopping and hanging out with me. I didn't think she had enough time to be cheating on her husband, but apparently she did have time, and she made use of that time. She wanted me to join her. Find someone who would give me money in exchange for casual sex. It didn't have to be someone young because, according to her, young men eventually end up causing trouble, so I could find someone not too old but old enough and who had lots of money. She even offered to help me find someone like that, but I had been so horrified by the idea of cheating on David all because I wanted money, so I had rejected the idea. At first. Dora didn't bring up the idea again after I rejected her first offer. But soon after Dora made that suggestion, I started dating someone. An affair. It was with the same man that was treating Dora to all the expensive lifestyles she got to have. But Dora didn't find out until later. I met Joe, who was in his late 60s, when he had decided to surprise Dora and take her out for lunch. We had been hanging out at a spa because she wanted a massage and a fresh manicure. I was waiting for her to finish up when she got a call from him. He was coming to pick her up, and she had been excited. She invited me to join them, and although I refused the offer, she insisted, saying he wouldn't mind. I agreed, and Joe's driver had come to where we were to pick us up. He took us to the most luxurious restaurant, and it was very expensive, one that I had never dreamt of stepping foot in with my budget-focused husband. We had varieties of food that day, food and wines that I had never had the luxury of tasting. It tasted so heavenly, and I envied Dora even more because of how doting on her Joe was. I wanted what she had, and I knew right there that I was going to do everything to get it, including sidetracking my best friend. My opportunity came when Joe stepped outside to take an important business call. I lied to Dora that I had to use the bathroom, and she nodded absent-mindedly. Her husband had called at that moment, so she was trying to dismiss him as quickly as possible. She was very distracted and didn't see me go outside instead of going to the back where the bathroom was located. I waited until Joe was done with his phone call, and I stepped towards him. I was planning on going seductive, but since I had never had to seduce a man, I was quite clumsy, and I even stammered, which I never did before. Joe had gotten the hint, and he had collected my number and promised to call me when I wasn't with my friend. I was so happy and excited, and I waited for his call for about a week, but he never called. I was beginning to think he didn't want me because I was an amateur when he called me on a Saturday to come keep him company. Apparently, Dora wasn't available, and he needed a companion. David was home, and so was Sophia, so I needed to lie to them because I couldn't tell them exactly where I was going. So I told David that Dora had an argument with her husband, and he had left the house, and she's very upset. David had, of course, allowed me to go so I could be with Dora. I left and went to the address that Joe had sent me to meet him. It turned out to be a hotel. I went in, and I was immediately directed to his suite. He had an entire suite to himself, and I was just amazed. I got into his room, and he insisted that I order any kind of food I wanted to eat. I was so happy, and I did as he asked. I ate to my fill, and I was satisfied. All this while, Joe had been on a business call, and I waited for him to finish. When he was done, he laid on the huge king-sized bed and asked me to strip. I was surprised. I knew he would eventually ask for sex, but I didn't know it was on the first day, so I was hesitant. But I didn't know that Joe was an impatient man, and he got very angry easily. He asked me to leave if I wasn't going to do what I was told to, so I apologized to him and immediately started stripping off my clothes. First it was my gown, then my bra, and then my panties. Joe seemed very satisfied watching me strip, and I could even see his erection from where I stood at the edge of the bed. He asked me to climb up the bed, and I did. He asked me to strip off his clothes, and I obeyed with clumsy hands. He then told me to go on my knees and hold the bedpost. I obeyed again, and then, without warning, he entered into me from the back. One thing that Joe enjoyed the most while having sex was spanking. For an old man, his hands surely were painful as he smacked my bottom while his dick was digging in my asshole. I didn't know that at first, being my first time with him. So when he spanked me hard the first time, I screamed and almost removed myself from underneath him. The key word is almost. Joe held me down with his hands and slapped me again hard while asking me to shut up, which I did. I only whimpered my pains while he continued smacking me like a rider on his horse, urging it to go faster by smacking it with his whip. He was done within 5 minutes. But it had been the most painful 5 minutes of my life. My bottom felt like it was on fire, and I couldn't even sit properly for 2 days. He rewarded me greatly after the whole thing, though. He gave me the biggest amount I had ever seen before in my life as a reward for his sexual satisfaction, and he told me he would call me when he wanted to see me again. The sex part didn't tempt me enough to respond to his call when he did call again, but the money did. And after sleeping with Joe 3 more times, I was spending as much as Dora was on each of our outings and even more. Dora was surprised by the change, and when she asked me where I was getting the money, I lied and told her that David got a promotion at work and has now decided that we could spend money the way we liked. It wasn't a total lie. David had actually gotten a promotion at work and had a huge paycheck now, but it only drove him into crazy saving mode because he wanted our daughter to have the best life even if we weren't around, and there's our retirement plans too. The only thing I did lie about to Dora was about David giving me the money I was spending. She believed me and didn't say anything about it, but she only started to complain that Joe was changing, like he was seeing another person. When I asked her why she thought so, she told me he barely called her for booty calls anymore, and without booty calls, it meant no money for her to spend. I dismissed her worries as nothing, so that she wouldn't connect all the dots. Joe probably preferred me because I was new and fresh, an exciting change from someone who knew him very well. Although I enjoyed watching Dora spend less and less after being the one who spent the most, because Joe hardly had her time, I didn't quite enjoy living a double life. Joe was quite demanding, which meant I had to see him any time he called with no excuse. He was brutal during sex, too. When I was getting used to his hands slapping my butt every time during sex, and he realized that I wasn't whimpering in pain anymore, he introduced a whip. The pain made him horny, and it also made him come easily. It was always painful enduring sex with him. He was a crazy old man, but I couldn't say anything about it because there was no one I could tell, and I couldn't stop because I wanted his money. So I continued enduring the pain and allowing him to treat me like a slut or a sex worker that he could use anytime he wanted. My relationship with Joe, even though I tried for it not to, affected my relationship with my family. I hardly spent any time with Sophia, and then there was the fact that she preferred her father anytime, any day. And I also barely had sex with David. If I wanted to, it was only in the dark, and I avoided him touching my butt because of how sensitive it usually was after suffering the assault on it during the day. And also because I didn't want David feeling the rough strip marks on my bottom. David noticed but didn't say anything about it at first, but began to ask questions when one day I was having a shower, and he had decided to step in with me. It wasn't unusual, and in fact, we did that very much when we were newly married. But I panicked and screamed that he got out of the shower. David had been shocked, but he had done as I asked. I didn't want him seeing the red marks on my butt and on my wrists from when Joe decided to try something new and had tied my hands with strong ropes against the bedpost while he did things to me. Things I'd rather not speak of. David had waited for me to be done with bathing and had asked questions. Why was I only allowing sex at night with the light switch off? And why wouldn't I let him see me again? I had never been shy with David. I was usually a confident woman, and even when David and I had sex for the first time, I wasn't shy of the lights on, even though David had asked. So I knew that my sudden shyness around him was suspicious. I lied to him that I noticed some fats that usually weren't there before, and that, for some reason, I felt sensitive about my body, which was why I was visiting the gym regularly to get rid of it. David had assured me that he didn't mind if I was fat because he'd love me regardless. So he apparently believed my lies because he kissed me as if to reassure me. I felt guilty that instant. I was lying to the man I love all because of my greediness. I felt really bad to the extent that when Joe called me that morning after David had left for work and taken Sophia with him to drop her off at school, I didn't pick up his call. I just let the phone ring and ring until it became silent. Joe never called twice, but he did this time, but I still couldn't bring myself to pick up. Later that day, I decided to do some shopping to uplift my mood, and I called Dora, who was only too excited to join me. I noticed that she was picking as much as she had always done, and I had asked her why she was so chirpy. Apparently, Joe had called her that morning, and of course, she had gone to him without hesitation. He apparently even gave her more than he usually would to make up for the past couple of weeks. I pretended like I was happy for her, but inside, I was fuming. I couldn't believe that Joe found a replacement just after one morning of refusing to meet him, so I texted him secretly that I wanted to see him. He had responded fast enough. I went to see him at the usual hotel, and instead of shouting at him angrily like I planned, I shamelessly went on my knees and begged him to forgive me for ignoring his calls in the morning. Call me shameless or a whore. But I really wasn't ready to lose all the financial benefits I had being with Joe, so I did what I had to do. I begged. And Joe had forgiven me, but under a condition. I was to be his sex slave for 2 whole days without expecting to leave. I wasn't even allowed to leave the bed without permission. I didn't have a choice. Or rather, I chose not to have a choice. I accepted the offer and spent 2 torturous days with Joe as his sex slave. I lied to David that Dora had asked me to visit her parents with her, and I couldn't say no. David didn't say anything, but he didn't object either, so I thought everything was going on perfectly. I got more money than I could account for while having an affair. And then I had the perfect family, my husband and child. I was tying up my loose ends so that both relationships didn't clash, and I was doing it so well. Nothing could ever go wrong. Or so I thought. The first person to find out about my affair had been Dora. She had been going through my phone that day, which I had carelessly dropped when she came to my home to hang out with me. She had stumbled upon a text from Joe to meet him at the hotel, one she was very much familiar with. She didn't confront me directly. In fact, she pretended not to know anything when I finally stepped back into the room. But the day I was supposed to meet Joe, she had followed me and had ended up in front of Joe's hotel room. I was shocked when she called my name, and before I could turn fully, she attacked me by grabbing my hair while calling me all sorts of names. I was in pain, and I knew I would lose lots of hair because of how soft my scalp was, so I kept begging her to let go, and when she wouldn't, I got angry and grabbed her hair too. We created a scene, and we were both taken out by the security guard that Joe had called. He didn't even care that we were fighting because of him. He didn't even bother stepping out of his suite. He just called the security to evacuate us. Dora wasn't done with me, though. She started to threaten me that she would expose me to David, and I laughed and dared her to go ahead, because I also would expose her to her husband. She was so angry and spat at me before leaving. I was also very furious, and from that day, we became sworn enemies. Joe didn't mind our rivalry, though, and continued asking for both our services. I knew he was sleeping with Dora again because she would purposely forget her underwear in the bathroom, one we bought together and that she knew I knew was definitely hers, so she could show some sort of superiority. I did the same thing too. I would drop my jewelry or something that we bought together and that she knew was mine. It was silly and stupid of us, and we were just being petty. But we didn't stop. This continued for some weeks before everything disastrous happened. That particular day I was watching David draw his budget for the next month, and my daughter was right beside him watching her cartoons. I was irritated by his lack of ability to spend money on free will, and I had jokingly said to our daughter that her father was a piggy bank. Sophia had asked me what it meant, and I told her it was just a silly word. What I didn't expect was that Sophia would take it seriously and would continue repeating it every day. I didn't even know that David took offense to it because he never said anything. Until that day. That awful day. Sophia had yet again called her father a piggy bank, and he had stood up angrily and asked if we could speak privately. Our housekeeper was around that day, so David asked her to take Sophia out for a walk. I was surprised because David rarely got angry with me. In fact, I had only ever seen him angry 4 times in our marriage. He first paced the living room without saying anything for 2 minutes before he finally dropped the bombshell. I want a divorce, and I'm going to be filing for a custody lawsuit too. Shocked is probably an understatement of how I felt at that moment. I was surprised and alarmed and scared and worried, all the emotions all at once. When I asked him if he was joking, he looked at me with so much anger, and for the first time since knowing David, I was scared. Scared of him. He removed his phone from his jacket without saying a word, and he clicked something before handing it to me. My blood drained out of my face upon seeing what it was David was showing me. It was a video of Dora and me fighting outside Joe's hotel room, and then there were pictures. Ones that showed me leaving Joe's room, and there were the ones of Dora leaving too. There was even one that was particularly incriminating. It had been that day that Joe was so horny he couldn't wait to get inside, and he had put his hand inside my trouser to reach for my vulva while I clumsily unlocked the door, which wasn't very easy, especially with his hand inside of me. I couldn't say anything. There was no amount of lying or pretending that could get me out of that situation. The evidence was obvious, and there was nothing that could prove my innocence, not that I was actually innocent. I went on my knees, quickly begging David to forgive me, but David only looked at me with disgust written all over his face. He said he noticed how my dresses started changing, how I would walk into the house limping from a supposed girls' time with Dora, how I didn't allow him to touch me because someone else was already doing it. He had his suspicions, but he didn't have evidence, and then when he noticed the bridge between Dora and me, he hired a private investigator who got him that video that a staff had apparently secretly recorded, and then pictures of Dora and Joe, and then Joe and me. It was easy to guess the cause of the bridge between us after getting the pictures and videos. He spent the last few days wondering why I would go as far as cheating on him and also fighting with my best friend over a man, and he finally realized it. It was because, according to what I called him, I am a piggy bank. You told our daughter that her father is a piggy bank. So it was apparently because he saved up and didn't allow us to spend recklessly. That was why I thought it best to cheat on him. I wanted to deny everything. I wanted to shake my head and say it wasn't true, but I couldn't. It was all true. All he said was true. I am a selfish and greedy lying whore that her husband now wants nothing to do with. As if to drive his point home, David packed a bag for our daughter and him and left for his parents' place, leaving an instruction that I mustn't be home when he came back. So please, guys, help me. I really feel horrible about everything I did, and I know that I don't deserve a second chance, not after everything. But please, guys, I cannot afford to lose David and our child. I love them so much, and I feel so horrible it took all of this to see that. Please, what do I do? Update. Hello, Reddit. It's me again. I cannot say that I've got great news, when in fact I've got horrible news. I never had to understand what being lonely felt like. I was always surrounded by people who loved me and would do anything for me. First it was my family growing up, and then it was David. But sadly, I have none of that right now. David wanted to ruin me so badly, he shared the video and pictures with our families, and even Dora's husband. So right now, everyone hates me so much and cannot even stand me. My mother had looked at me with so much hatred and then walked out on me, while my father had only one sentence: "You're no longer part of this family as you have brought shame upon us." My siblings didn't even want to speak to me at all, and my daughter, Sophia, although unaware of everything happening, had stuck to her father and refused to even let me carry her. I left my parents' house that day feeling utterly alone and sucked into a world of darkness, which I still very much am in until now. I arrived home that day to meet my luggage outside the house with a file placed on it. The file contained the divorce letter and also the custody lawsuit. I noticed that the clothes packed were the ones that I got from the money Joe gave me. I thought I had wanted those things, but losing my family had made me realize just how stupid I was, thinking that those things were responsible for my happiness. I couldn't stand the sight of it all. The expensive bags, jewelry, and dresses that were worth more than a house. I threw them away. All of it. And I only took 2 things with me: the file and a picture that had the 3 of us in it. David, Sophia, and I. I knew that was probably the only picture I would get to have to remember and torture myself with the loss of the most important people in my life. My greediness has led me into hell, and now I'm stuck with no way out. Dora, apparently too, is stuck in the same hell, only in a different compartment. Her husband threw her out of the house, and thinking she still had Joe, she had gone to meet him, only to be met by another woman who was new and apparently crazy. She had gotten into a fist fight with the woman, and the woman had sent thugs her way. She is now presently in the hospital, recuperating from different wounds left on her body. It's painful how I let the flashy things of the world drive me into adultery. I was sleeping with a man who was almost as old as my own father because of money. I let him use me, slap me around like a sex worker, hit me, and cause wounds on my body because of financial gains. One I don't even have again right now. I thought everything would last. The money, my family, and even my relationship with my best friend. I thought I could juggle everything and still not get caught. I was stupid to believe that I could have everything and not lose one. Or in this case, all. It's such a shame how my life has ended. I've ended up ashamed and as a castaway. Knowing that David will never forgive me or look at me the same way again is very painful, and I don't think I can ever forgive myself for hurting him that much. Update. Hello, Reddit. This is probably my last post here. It's been a few months after the whole thing, and I wish I could say things are slightly different or better than the time since my last post, but that would be a lie. Things have gone from bad to worse. I officially and legally now have no right or claim to my daughter and to my husband. I'm a divorced, lonely woman, with absolutely no one in the world to talk to or to support me, even here. I see all the hateful comments you guys give under every post. I might ignore them and not respond, but that doesn't mean it hurts any less. I cannot blame anyone now, can I? I ruined my life myself. All on my own, I destroyed every good thing I had going for myself, and life feels really awful to me. Well, I heard that Joe's affair with younger women somehow got leaked to his board of directors, and they are withdrawing their support for him. He might be running bankrupt soon. Do I feel happy? No. Because if I hadn't been as stupid as to get involved with him in the first place, I wouldn't be in this mess. I wish so desperately that I could turn back the hands of time and undo all the wrongs I've done. But then, life doesn't do do-overs now, does it? I'm stuck in this hellhole that I created all by myself with no assistance.